Today we have our next to last forum presentation for the year. It's been quite a year. A year ago, Carol was asking us to do our Think Outside the Box sessions. And then in September, we had our DEIB. And then we had Church and Neighborhood. And we had a bit of a break, followed by Susan Orr, and then our long conversations with the John Dorhallow book. All of that was ideas. And I think that we kept referring back to the budget and the finances of downtown. And that's what we're going to speak about today. I'm going to ask Carol to introduce themselves.
Morning. Morning. The work of the finance team is to oversee the finances of the church and to work with the session, the director of operations, and the business manager and staff to assure the prudent management of the church's activities, mission, staff, and congregation. It is not the role of the finance team to comment on the future direction of the church in the broad sense. Our responsibilities are to track the work of a good investment management firm, monitor our profit and loss statements so that extraordinary expenses are addressed in our annual budgeting process, and to keep everything honest. There are many handouts for you this morning, enough to satisfy almost everyone's need for numbers. Ed is going to simplify the content using the budget as a reflection of the operating plan. Sam will give you insight into how we manage the endowment. The budget is prepared each year by the Finance Committee to reflect the session's policies. When completed, it is submitted to the session for their approval. Keep in mind that the budget is a breakdown of how the resources will be deployed. In effect, it is the plan. It provides all the people responsible for various activities of the church what financial resources are available to them. At the conclusion of the presentations, we will take questions. Those on Zoom can put your questions in chat. We will try to answer as many questions as we can in the time remaining. And if we do not get to your question, we hope you will speak to one of us later or put your question in writing. I'm going to take the first questions at the end that pertain to music that are already written in the that we got from David Lee. He sent what was sent in to him, and some are just comments, and there is one that has quite a few questions in it. And then I have to leave. You'll see me leave because we're having a special surprise ending to our church service this morning, and I have to go down and make sure things are set up. Okay. I'd like to introduce Ed Safer.
Thank you, Carol. When you see 48 or so pages of written material, it does require a little simplifying. And this isn't up high enough? Okay. So what I'm going to try and do, and I'm not sure we'll see if we accomplish it, is simplify the budget so you can visualize a little better of what makes the budget up. And then I will tear it apart a little bit and give you a sense of where some of the costs are relative to how we are using the church. So I'll first run through the budget. And this is just kind of repeating what I just said. There will be three questions at the end. What does it cost to operate the facility with the tenants? What would DUPC's budget look like if we were the renter? And finally, what would DUPC's budget be if we did not rent? So the first thing I'd like to cover is the income side. The income is made up of offerings, facility income, and what we take from our endowment. Now, you can see that the pledges, and there's a PWP is what we refer to as paid without pledge. And you can see that our total offerings are budgeted now at $147,500. All the data that I'm going to present is budget. It isn't actual. Sam will, I think, has some things that will give you actuals that go through 2023. Where do I point this? Looking a little more closely at the offerings, we have a membership, most recent count of about 150 people. We estimate the number of pledging units to be approximately 100. That is not an accurate figure. That is an estimation. The number of people who have pledged is 39. That's pledged in 2024. Total pledged to date is 100,000. And the top 5 contributors make up about 47% of the pledge income. And the top 10 at 65%. The average pledge is about $2,500. The rental space we use right now, exclusively used by renters, is 21,800. And the shared space that all renters use, including ourselves, is 14,652 square feet. Space available to rent is approximately 8,500 square feet. That would represent at our current rental square footage, 110,500 additional dollars if we were able to rent it. I would comment on the $13 a square foot. Class B office space in Rochester now is about $15 a square foot. So we're quite competitive. Personnel expenses. That is the big piece of our budget. It amounts to $645,000. And this picture just gives you kind of a feel for the distribution of where those costs are. Now, specifically, you can see the rundown of where these costs are with I think the two that I'd like to point out is the administrative staff and the facility staff, because those are the two big items. The upper two, pastor, music, are DUPC's responsibility, and we've broken out a little bit more on the music, which Carol will comment on later. And then there are the ministry program costs. Worship and music, primarily that budget is music. The learning ministry is, you can see there is 10,000. And the staff for that is both for the nursery and for our person who teaches on Sunday morning. Justice has a budget of $6,290. They use that for a variety of contributions into the community. Teen empowerment be an example. Our congregational life is one where we may have dinners or we may have receptions. It's kind of an incidental expense.
Will you accept a question?
At the end. I want to go through this rapidly so that keep in mind your question though. And this are right now our benevolences. Now I put another item in here. It's not an official part of the budget, but I wanted you to understand what we are subsidizing in the building that is not included by the rents. And that amounts to $261,000. That is $261,000 over and above 5%. And later on, you will see that 5% more than covers DUPC's costs. So just to summarize, personnel is the big piece. Non-personnel is all those things that we looked at after they would include building costs, et cetera. Ministries, benevolences, making a total budget for 2024 of almost $940 $940, sorry, $940,000. Now let's break down the building operating costs. Personnel costs, we've already indicated, is a heavy piece of this. The administrative staff, I have taken from, the administrative staff would remain, what we'd be using on administrative staff, well, you can see what it is, and the total personnel for the administrative and facility staff. When we get to breaking out how, answering the question, what would the budget be for DUPC, the administrative facility staff would change a little. Non-personnel expenses include things like insurance, office expenses. I wanted to give you a feel for what's included in that figure. Facility expense is the big one here. It includes utilities and maintenance. It also includes $70,000 this year for what we would call capital improvements, the things that we need to do in order to maintain the building in a first-class way. So it'll last for years. New roof is an example. There is a handout that for the capital improvements, I believe. And if you don't have it, we can share it with you. Now, let's look at what would happen if DUPC does not own the church but rents. We would rent the space that we are now exclusively using. And the pastor and music would remain the same. The learning would remain the same. But here's where it begins to change. The administrative staff, probably we would use a secretary and maybe a part-time bookkeeper. Anyway, I put in 80,000 for that. That may be a little low, but you get the idea. Building costs for our exclusive use at $13 a square foot would be almost 56,000. And the ministries, we're assuming they would remain the same as well, as would be benevolence. So our total DUPC expense, if we were renting, would be $393,000. And that's how it would be distributed. Just to give you a little better sense of the exclusive space costs, these are the places that we are using it. The one thing there I would point out to you right now, Halleck Lounge is common space. It can be used by anybody. But if we were to rent, I think we would want to have some specific assembly space that was ours, that we didn't have to worry about scheduling. And that would be the Halleck Lounge. Again, DUPC does not own. What you are seeing is 147 would remain the same for our offerings. Our expenses would be 393,000. Our endowment would need to support 246,000.
Just to jot down, because I think we have those in the.
It's in the handout if you.
The pie chart.
Okay.
It's in this one.
Yeah. There's a handout of slides. I can come back to this if there is a problem. Now, let's look at DUPC continuing to own the church and does not rent. So the church is our exclusive use. And in this case, our totals would come to 707,000, somewhat lower than the 940,000 with the rent. There we would need to use the endowment 560,000. So let's review. Endowment withdrawal, if DUPC owns, is 507,000. Owns and rents. If DUPC owns and does not rent, 560,000. So we're a little better off renting. And we haven't really fully rented. DUBC does not own and rent. We would need 246,000 from our endowment. Now, to offset the considerations of money there are what it is that we are likely to do in the future. If we were to do nothing more than we are doing now, that is continue to have a worship service, maybe some learning, a forum, this probably, 246 from our endowment is probably the way to go. But I think what we're on a search for is what our next mission is. And will we need the church to do that? So that's the item that I'd like you to keep in mind. Let's take a minute on assets. Some of you are familiar with accounting. What I've just showed you is an income statement. The balance sheet is really a statement of assets and liabilities at a point in time. In this case, it's December 31, 2023. And our book value has remained the same, and that basically is the restricted portion of our endowment. We cannot spend down beyond, so that there will always be $1,974,000, almost $2 million that we will not be able to spend. We can use it to earn, it can be invested, and we can use the earnings. Now, at some point, there was the question of whether we would sell the building. And if we were to sell the building, we'd need to know what is the building worth at today's market. We do not have an assessment of that. And so I would point out to you that our fixed assets or the book value, by the way, the book value here does not include the investments. My comment earlier, and I think the permanently restricted is almost 1,900,000, not the 1,974. So there are two pieces to the assets. One is the church itself and its contents, and the investments. I hope I haven't confused you. But just going back to the church itself, there are some things that probably ought to be assessed separately from the building itself. Our stained glass windows is one of them. We have some Tiffany windows, which on the market today could be over $1 million. And of course, our organ. I don't really think there's anything more to say about the investments. I've told you what is restricted and the portion which we can withdraw and spend. Now, the endowment is made up, or the investments, has some designated restricted funds. We have a music fund. There is an inheritance from the Downtown Arts Link, which we have tried to find out who has knowledge about it and what are the guidelines for spending it. And so far, we haven't been able to find it. But the session could, in fact, combine that with the music fund if they so chose. It is not, as far as we know, designated by a specific person. Then there's the memorial fund, which I think you're all familiar with. It is contributions to the church in honor of someone who is deceased. The flower fund is kind of an interesting one. It was a bequest that was made recently, maybe a year or two ago. I think it was around 10,000, and we've spent down from that. It's used for flowers and worship. The Christmas offering, I'm not sure why it's offset. That's my typing, I guess. The Christmas offering, I'm sorry, the Gleason Library Fund is something that's been ongoing. Others here may have more knowledge of it than I do. The organ maintenance fund, that's used primarily to clean the organ occasionally, the pipes, and I don't understand it, but it's there for needs. The refugee fund is apparently a contribution that was made a few years ago. when we were sponsoring, and I think Justice probably has a better handle on that. Now, let me go to the session designated funds. I noted in your questions that we had, there was understanding that we would set aside 10% of our bequests for benevolence. And in fact, we've done that, and the accounting is in front of you there. 133,274 is what's left, and session has responsibility for that. Then there is the session discretionary fund. That can go to anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be benevolence, could be used at the discretion of session. Right now, we've spent it down. So there is nothing there. And we haven't had recent bequests to renourish it. The ASR fund is really an inheritance from the downtown center concept when we hired the associate. When our two pastors left, we put all that on hold. And one of the things that I recognized was that downtown center was an ill-formed concept. We were going to develop it under the banner of downtown center. But ASR, by the way, is written there, addressing spiritual relevance. That is something that I think, as we look into the community and realize that there is a spiritual need that isn't being fulfilled through the traditional church. And we need to understand that. So this fund was set up to be used to develop that concept, and we can always call upon our endowment for more if we need it. The peace offering, I think you're all familiar with it. I would just note that what we collect, I think by policy, I believe of Presbytery, we're able to keep 25% for needs that we identify. Now, our targeted withdrawal calculation is based on 5% of the endowment, but a little more clarity might be helpful. The endowment, as you saw earlier, can only be sent down to a certain place, but the total, on the other hand, is earning money. And all those restricted funds are earning money in the endowment. And what it earns is used by the church for its budget. Those funds are fixed until spent. So when it comes time to calculate the 5% withdrawal, it's only fair to take that portion which subtracts out the funds which have been set aside for specific purposes. So the 5% withdrawal is somewhat less or is applied to something less than what the full endowment is. I might just look at some of the financial trends here, give you a little more insight. It's something that we watch, and it's something that guides our budgeting process. I haven't said anything about the budgeting process, but you know, Carol mentioned that we are responsible to the session to put in dollars what we will spend based on what session has directed. And usually that means only changes, because from year to year, our program has not changed a lot. So we have worship, we have the Sunday school, the forum program, so on. And we budget against that. And then we add to that what the information that we have and the trends that we have for the facilities. And then session, it goes to session usually in November or December and is approved. Or they send us back for more work, but that doesn't happen too often. I would point out that the trend in pledges is primarily due, I believe, we haven't really analyzed it thoroughly, but I believe is a result of loss of membership, deceased people, et cetera. And some of those people were fairly major givers. I I would point out that the payment without pledge has increased. I think we're getting a number of people that are not members, but contribute to it. And we also have some members that leave some flexibility. They don't want to commit up front, but that has also been increasing. I would also point out to you that the rentals is increasing. And the 282 figure that you see as a budget has already been exceeded. Those are leases and they're money that basically we can calculate or that we can book. And the expenses have risen, but we have found ways to save. And so, as you can see, between 2023 and 2024, we have some savings that have taken place. And that has been the result of some restaffing, reorganizing. And as a result, the withdrawal from the endowment has gone down. Take a minute to talk about opportunities. Reverend Phil, Pastor Phil, sent me an email saying, "I hope you don't leave everyone with a downer." And I said, "Oh no, this we're talking about possibilities. We're talking about what are the things that we can do." And so I made a list. These aren't adopted; they're possibilities, but I'll go through them. Increase the number of pledges. As you saw, there's 39 pledges, but maybe as many as 100 pledging units. Encourage financially capable people to aspire to give at least an average. The average now is $2,500, which is almost $50 a week. Focus on programs that attract members, especially young people and families. That is going to require some considerable thinking because we're not going to attract them if we do the kinds of things that have been traditionally done. We're going to have to really think about that. Some unique programs that address spiritual relevance for more people might be a direction that we take. Fund a small group of knowledgeable people. These could be prominent people. John Haldoor, help me out. The book. Yeah. He could be helpful. And we have a fund that there might be people in seminaries that are looking, the seminaries themselves are graduating people who know how to operate in the way in which we have been operating in the past. And we may have to find people in seminaries who are willing to rethink a little bit as well. Fund a small group of knowledgeable people to work then with us to develop that 3.0 kind of approach. The work of the ASR committee is sort of focused around that. And David is the one that identified the book and gave the presentation. And I think you're all familiar with that. We also can increase our rental opportunities. We're already doing that. But there are places in the church that we could rethink. The back dining room, celebration hall, and even the gym are not being used very much. And so we could get creative in that area as well. And we could also seek grants for matching funds. We found one and we couldn't react rapidly enough to take advantage of it, but it will require new money. And that may be something that we will need more discussion. I'd like to leave you with this. You've all seen this quote, or most of you have seen this quote before. Religion declined not because it was refuted, but because it became irrelevant, dull, oppressive, insipid. I'm not sure that people in this room feel that the religion in their life has been that, but there are a lot of people out there who do feel that. And that's really where our new members will come from. When faith is completely replaced by creed. Now, this church has downplayed creed, but worship is a discipline, loved by habit. When the crisis of today is ignored because the splendor of the past, when faith becomes an heirloom rather than a living fountain, when religion speaks only to the name of authority rather than the voice of compassion, its message becomes meaningless. That was written in the 60s, 1960. 50s. Well, I had a little aside when I was at Columbia. My wife did a typing job, did a number of typing jobs for Rabbi Heschel. I did have no idea of his influence on the Jewish community, but it was significant. And he is the representative, I think, of the Jewish community that walked in the Selma walk. And but I think that's worth thinking about to guide some of our thoughts. And I'm going to turn it over now to Sam, who's going to share with you the endowment thinking.
Very much.
That was great, Ed. Just for your clarification, of course, I sent this material out, the one that's the bigger one that has the contents on the front before Ed finished up doing his report, and he's added additional pages, and he made 20 copies. So if you don't have a copy of that, if you need a copy of that, you'd have to get one of his copies, which would not have the contents on the front. Anyway, if you do have the bigger pile or packet of information, if you go to page 31, I'm going to be covering the next couple pages. I don't know, David. I don't know.
We may need some help, Dave.
Yeah.
Hold on. What? So there's another presentation?
No, it's the one that maybe I should give you this.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, you should.
Bye.
I thought these were the same.
Me, I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
realize it wasn't all on one.
yeah, well, I didn't have his new one, so you used the right one. Well, anyway, if those who have it in form, if everyone got a copy of the big packet?
Yeah.
Well, then if you go to 31, that's just a summary. That is what we get on a monthly basis from Dave Meir for the summary of our investments. And up at the top, you see the line that says total investments. So at the end of April of this year, for 2024, the total endowment market value was $5,458,104. Anyway, and then you have a little idea with the history because it goes back to December of 2018. So for those that want to know what's happened to our endowment, over the last, 6 years or so. At any rate, that gives that. If we go to page 32, that gives you this is sort of a presentation that was given to us by Theme Capital Management. And if you see under highlights, the 2023 total return for their investments was 14.3% roughly. And the benchmark that we use in measuring our progress was 12.7%. So the so-called outperformance that we achieved last year was 1.58%. And then you see, since Theme Capital has been managing our investments since 10/1/2003, the total return has been 335.73%, or an annualized number of 7.54% over that long time period. And while the benchmark was up 272.44%, or an annualized 6.71, or without performance of an annualized number of 0.83%. So that gives you an idea of some perspective on our investments. If you go to page 33, this shows the actual portfolio, 33 and 34.
And your file has the PDF, right? And it's always sideways.
We're looking. for
Okay,
the
I don't know. I can't change it.
Yeah, what page are we on?
33 now. Yep, that's it. Okay. And people can't see it, but I mean, people who are listening in,
Oh, they can see it now.
they may see it. So all this does is give you an idea of how we're balancing growth versus risk, to show you that we have a mix of investments. And this is the total, if you look on the far left column, that is the percentage represented by these different so-called asset classes. And the top couple are short-term funds, and or class equivalents, essentially 7.1% of the total portfolio. And then what Thien calls income, which are really bond investments, which representing about 30% of the total portfolio. And under that are equities. Most of these are mutual funds, selected mutual funds. And under the equity mutual funds, they're in certain groupings, large cap blend. These are just types of mutual funds. And then large cap growth, large cap value, and so on, are roughly 54%. That's on page 33, but on page 34 is the international fund, which is First Eagle Overseas. That's an international equity fund. And the total of equities are 62.4%. So we have a mix of funds, bond funds and equity funds. They're all mutual funds, but that gives you the balance of stocks and bonds in our portfolio. And when the market does poorly, obviously we're not going to do as poorly, but when stocks do well, with the majority of our assets in equities, we will do well. And the 14.3% return last year was because of the returns in the market being so good. But that gives you an idea of the mix of our investments and how they're managed. And then if we go to page 35, there you get, again, sort of a summary of the results of the portfolio. That this gives you the actual numbers for calendar year 2023, with the beginning value down to, what was added or withdrawn. Net contributions are, of course, all withdrawals, and the capital appreciation, what the growth in the portfolio was, the income from dividends and interest, and then the total, which we all saw was 5,576,345. So that gives you what the actual returns were. So for the calendar year 2023, that column down below under the total portfolio, 14.2%, and then the 5-year number, 10-year number, 15 or 20-year number, as to give you some clarification on how our investment funds have done over the years. And then on page 36, you see actual the returns a year by year from 2003 to 2023. So there's a 20-year period, and you can see under annual returns what the actual percentage change was based on the total return of our investments. And it ends up at the bottom, what the annual return was for that 20 years, 335.73% or an annualized return of about 7.5%. And then it shows it for the so-called moderate portfolio, which is our benchmark. And what the next column does is what bonds alone, the aggregate bond funds have done. And then on the far right corner, just what equities have done based on the Standard & Poor's 500. So obviously, if we had been all in stocks, we would have done better, but we would have ridden a bigger roller coaster because the volatility of the market was so much more than what ours was. Okay, well, that is just about a lot of detail about our investments, how they're being managed, combination of a little commentary on risk and return. Ours is essentially a balanced approach. Now, the next 3 pages or 4 pages, 37 and so on, are projections. If we take a look at the first one, what we're doing is we're projecting the value of the fund beginning on 12/31/23, which is that 5,576,000. And we're keeping that level. I'm sorry. We're using that as the beginning number, and then we're taking out that number annual withdrawals of 507,422 out every year. That's a big assumption. You know, obviously we're going to be taking out different amounts, but that's the assumption in this projection of keeping that withdrawal constant. That's the far right column. And then we're saying, okay, the portfolio value is going to change by 5% per year. And the result of those assumptions is the 5% earnings or return from our investments, and the withdrawals being 507,420. How long do our assets last? And the box goes around the $1 million mark, and I have made a little line under that. And on the following pages, if you go to page 38, it's a little different format. My apologies, but Dave printed it out, and you see that the only change in the assumptions is this is a 6% return or earnings from our investments, and that lasts 17 years before it goes below or it gets to $1 million. I marked it whenever it went below $1 million, and that was 17 years. So it lasted longer. It's pretty intuitive when you figure that the return is greater. And page 39 uses a 7% return. And of course, that lasts for 20 years or before it goes below $1 million. It lasts for 20 years. And then in the last one on page 40, that's 8% return. And that lasted for 26 years before it went below $1 million. So there are some, you can fiddle with the assumptions on how much we're going to take out and what our investment return has been. And of course, over the last 20 years, it's been more than 7%. But that some years it's been more than that, some years has been less than that. So anyway, it gives you an idea of possibly what might happen to our investments if with these varying assumptions. Well, that's all I wanted to present. Very quick. It looks like we've got about 10-15 minutes maybe for questions, which is going to be impossible. But Ed, why don't you come up here and stand next to me?
Carol was going. Yeah.
And do we have first some questions in the audience here that we should address? Oh, Carol, I'm sorry. Yep.
Because I had to leave. Dave Lee sent us the questions or comments that people in the congregation had. I assume, Dave, that not everybody here received these, is that correct?
They were all sent out,
Oh, did everybody receive these?
but not the last three questions. not the
Oh,
last
okay.
couple pages.
All right, well, I didn't write any of these. I don't know who did.
We can't throw tomatoes.
Right, but I do want to read them to you. They all have to do with music. That's what I went through and looked at. The first one that I have is, why with a congregation of our size do we have a music budget of over $100,000? Having a choir with all but 2 church members makes no sense. It would be nice to have a real church choir using the talented members we have and perhaps develop a sense of community instead of having a Sunday morning concert from Eastman students. I paired that with this one has a lot of questions. I have heard that we paid the members of the choir. How much are they each paid? How much does that come to per Sunday? How many are paid? Do church choir members also get paid? So I went to Lee and sat down with him, and then I wrote back to him what he told me, and he clarified it even a little bit further.
So if they want to refer to the slide.
Oh, those are the questions. Yes. Okay. Lee is salaried. Jason and Alan are paid per service. Jason is paid $210 per week for his service and rehearsals. Alan is paid $135 per week for rehearsal and service. During the summer, Alan is paid $125. Jason does not get paid during the summer unless he's here for something special. There are currently 18 members in the choir, although some Sundays there are 15 and some are 16. If they're not there, if they're getting paid, they don't get paid. But of those 18 members, 10 are volunteers and 8 are students who are paid $90 a week. So what do they get for $90? Of course, the taxes would be taken out of that. For that $90, they attend rehearsal on Wednesday night for 2 hours, rehearsal Sunday morning for an hour, and then the church service. So if you were to, divide 4 rehearsals or performance into that $90 after they take out the taxes, it's not very much that these students get paid. So I wanted to give you those numbers. Okay. Someone wrote this. Have we asked affected staff for suggestions on how to reduce expenses? I'm hearing a lot of rumbling from certain people that the music budget is too big. Have we asked Lee for his recommendations of how we might reduce that expense? I love the music and the choir, but I also understand the financial realities we are facing. And Lee and I talked about this a bit, and there may be some ways that we can reduce costs, but we didn't talk about all of it, and we can't make the decisions anyway. Another person wrote, our music minister welcomed my suggestions of sacred music I could undertake with our choir. Making music with the skilled and dedicated members of the choir and our music minister was deeply meaningful to me spiritually and hopefully uplifting as well to our congregation. Our choir rehearses Wednesday nights. This has never fit into my schedule, so I am grateful to the many members of our congregation who over the years have given of themselves in this way so faithfully. Music college students are young people who face tremendous competition in a society transitioning away from traditional music towards praise bands. If our church can offer appreciation and encouragement to these brave and talented individuals, that is our ministry to them. Also, where would we be culturally if J.S. Bach had not been employed for the majority of his life as a church musician? Supporting the arts by experiencing them as a congregation feels like a win-win to me. May we think of generations to come when we train young people and thank them for their efforts. And finally, I know that many people think the cost of our music program is too high and should be cut back. I believe our ministry of music is as meaningful as our ministry of theology. In fact, I believe they are one of the same and should be considered as such. I remember a saying from years ago that, quote, "Those who sing pray twice." It is through our music ministry that worship is glorified. And this person goes on to say, I also believe that our endowment is a gift from God as well as from those who contributed to it. When we give, we will receive generously back. I have seen this in my own life, and I believe it holds the same for our church. We should not manage our finances out of fear, quote, quote, fear of losing, but out of the joy of giving. And I believe that God will keep us afloat. For this reason, I am increasing my pledge for this year. So one of those opportunities that I heard about, those are the ones that concern music and that I just wanted to make sure that you heard.
Okay. Right. More questions here?
I know that some of the feedback was captured and put into this presentation. Will we be able to see all of the feedback that was sent?
All of the feedback, you mean questions?
Questions and feedback that were sent.
I can send that to you.
Yeah,
No, we don't have all of them. They're not in the presentation.
No.
Yeah.
There were a couple more.
Right.
Sam had his too early.
yeah. I sent it out too early. Well, yeah, I think that's a good thing for David to send out. Again,
Yes.
just
I'd
send
like
them
that.
all out.
That would be great.
It's on eConnect to everybody.
And then I have a question in all of the Shaw Room is not in all of the computations and descriptions. I don't see that. I see the Halleck Lounge, I see the Sanctuary at Celebration Hall, but I don't see the Shaw Room.
The show room,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Well, the cumulative common areas, it is included. The only reason I broke out the Halleck Lounge was for that calculation of what we would do if we rented. Does that help? Does that help?
When we rent, it would
Yes.
include,
It would include the Halleck Lounge, but not the showroom.
Okay, thank you.
But that's, this is hypothetical. Yeah.
well, there isn't a charge. I think it's $250 for the show room. If someone rents just this for some function. I'd have to confirm that with Eileen, but I think it's $150 or $250. Okay, Bill?
I want to thank you for a lot of work, not only pulling all this stuff together, but the organization of it. Because I think that wherever we have a perspective, there's data here that's going to help inform that perspective. And it's a job well done. Thank you.
I'll pass it on to Ed mostly for that, but all this is information that should be available to everybody. I guess maybe historically it hasn't been, but anyway, thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
just a quick question. The amount of the endowment that is earmarked that you cannot use, I think it was just under 2 million. I
Yes.
just didn't know, why is that? It can't go below the value of our assets, or there's some other contingency?
Well, some of it has to do with if people gave money that was restricted for a particular purpose. That's part of it.
Okay.
But I think some of it, no, go ahead, Ed.
Gene Wolfarth did a fair amount of work on this, maybe a dozen years ago. And it is bequests where you cannot spend the principal.
Got it.
Right. That's the restriction.
Okay, thank you.
But, if we ever got to that point, which I hope we never do, but if we ever did, there are ways around that. We had a couple requests that were restricted at one time, and we went to the Attorney General of New York State and got that lifted. So, you know, this is what we follow and what we track, and we get the help of the audit firm that Hevron that does our annual audit.
Hi,
Yes.
you know, I've been following this issue of the Session Benevolence Fund for a long time. And I'm wondering, I see that there's something like $133,000 in that fund
Yes.
right now, is that correct?
Correct.
And how are we apportioning, how are we spending that?
It's all by determination by session. We consider it restricted until the session approves some use of it.
So, can Justice, for example,
If they go to session and say they would like it for a particular reason and they want it taken from that fund and session approves, we do it, we send it.
okay, because my understanding is that it's to be used for mission or whatever outside of the church, beyond our church building.
Well, maybe, I mean, that can be done. That can be done. I mean, a mission benevolence, I think the definition implies that, but I can tell you that if session determines that we are, you know, spending it money for a particular purpose and it's something for us, I think we're going to be obligated to do it if session approves. Session is in charge.
Just one quick thing. You had put the justice budget at $6,250 or some such thing.
That's in 2020.
Okay. Oh, so it was raised because it's been $5,000 for years.
I guess it has been because that's what it is.
And dutifully spend it.
Well, just to your earlier question, Sam and I are tag teaming here a little bit, but I'm not on session anymore. But one of the things that session has been wrestling with is clarity about the future. And so I think there's some reluctance to spend. There's a couple big funds there. One is the music fund, and the one you point out, the benevolence fund. Until we have clarity, what are we trying to accomplish as a congregation? And we need that discussion. And justice is a part of that.
Well, let's talk then.
But we don't do it piecemeal. Right now, it's kind of balkanized. And I think the step that would be most helpful is to bring some clarity to what these various mission elements are trying to accomplish. There's a lot of work being done in the community, and well, I don't want to get into that discussion, but you understand what I'm talking.
We just don't want to defer it forever while we talk.
I have a quick question. If we reach the point where we decide to sell the building, would the proceeds from the sale go to our endowment? Would we own the proceeds?
Yes.
Well, yes, although Presbytery gets involved.
Yeah,
Presbytery
so, yeah.
owns all the buildings of the Presbyterian churches in the region. Now, the history, and we've had a number of churches in the Presbytery in the last year. I think there are 5 churches that are basically gone out of business. And there have been remaining funds from those, principally a sale of their churches. And they come to the trustees of the Presbytery and make a claim on them. And most of the time, in my observation, and I'm the church's representative on Presbytery at the moment, but they've permitted that. So that so that remaining funds of churches that go out of business, I mean, if we sold the church and had, you know, go from a 5 million to a $10 million endowment, I don't know what would happen, but there would be claims on it by the presbytery at some point.
But that would mean, if we continued as a congregation, I guess should have been my
Yes.
follow-up question.
Right.
If we did not continue as a congregation, then our existing endowment would go to the presbytery.
Yeah, I think one of the criteria would be, are we viable as a congregation?
I have a question and a very brief comment. The question is, has the church applied for any preservation grants that would help us with the maintenance of the building because it's a historic building?
I think Ed actually alluded to that. Yes, we have, but they're matching funds.
Okay,
In other words, if we get 100,000, we have to come up with 100,000 to match that.
I see.
New money.
Okay,
New money, can't be money from the endowment.
oh, yes, okay. And the second is, I think this is sufficiently complicated and that people's voices in our congregation need to be heard more. So I would really love to see a session that's during the day, maybe after church, where we have more time for discussion.
Well, I was suggested to David already that if the Sunday Forum Committee wanted more time on answering questions, and I think a lot of the questions actually were beyond the purview, in my humble view, of the finance team. They're really about Phoebe got her hand up. But at any rate, I think that you know, we should go to session, or someone should go to session and say that there may be a special meeting that is not in the evening and available to review certain things or answer questions.
Yes, are there other groups who are interested in using our space, in renting our space? And is Spiritus Christus, are they going to continue indefinitely? Have you got any
Well,
idea of that?
that's unknown. I mean, they've indicated that they'd like to buy the building, but we never really got any kind of formal offer. And there's been no assessment of what the value of the building really is. And I wouldn't be in favor of selling the church unless we got the value for the church. So I think, in my view, I'm not sure that unless there's some generous donor that would pay for what the value is from the church for Spiritus, I think it's unlikely that we're going to get an offer to buy the church.
And do you see other groups wanting to rent spaces?
Yes, we have, I think, but, you know, again, we have to assess, you know, we've increased the rental space considerably in the last couple of years. But yes, periodically, I think we have gotten, I know the Civil Liberties, New York Civil Liberties Union is interested possibly in coming back into the church and taking the space on the third floor of the Institute building. And
The Quakers are
the Quakers are here, and they might be interested in taking more space because they've gotten a grant from New York State for the building projects that we heard a presentation on here in Sunday Forum a month or so ago.
Quickly,
And I know Elaine and Carolyn are active with
I
that.
was distressed to see that, when I turned on my GPS just this morning, this building is Spiritus Christi. I don't know how they pulled that off.
It has been for at least a year.
Has it?
Well, I don't know how that is controlled.
How do they bring in 30,000?
I was wondering, is the area above the church that we store costumes in and, there's another whole area that's has a floor that looks like the church up there. Is that available for rentals or usage?
I don't think
A lot
so.
of help.
Not the one that's above that. That's a big open space, but it's not
You can't walk on it?
completed.
Not safe.
It's not safe, no.
Oh, I
I mean, well, you can walk on it. They have boards and things like that. But where the storage of the costumes and so on, was conceivably that could be rented, but I don't know who it would be. Yeah.
It's 5 minutes to 11. Reverend Phil want us downstairs now. Next week, it is going to be Josie McClary, and there's going to be, she'll be updating us on the commission's plan. It's not a city commission, but a plan on the Juneteenth celebration in Rochester.
Thank you. Incredible job, guys.
It's not mine.
So much information.
Yeah, all right.